Hello everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Estes Firehawk, and this is a mini engine 13mm rocket, and it goes together fairly quickly with just a little bit of plastic cement. So let's go ahead and check our instructions here and make sure we have all of the parts. Okay, so our decal set there. Alright, in this bag we have the nose cone and the body tube. And one of the nice things about this is it's all pre-colored, so if you don't want to have to do any painting, this will be set to go. Okay, and then in here we have the fin can, launch lug, motor retainer, the base of the nose cone, and the shock cord. And then the parachute. Okay, so let's compare that to what we've got on the sheet, and it looks like we do have everything. So I'm going to clear most of this away and we will get started. Our first assembly is the fin can, or fin unit here, and the instructions show using a tube type plastic cement, and you can do that, but I found that for this type of gluing, where we have some very small edges here, it's better to use a brush-on type of cement here. So you can use either one, but I think you're going to get neater results if you use a brush-on cement. Before we put the cement on, let's quickly put these together and make sure they fit. So there's a little rod on one side, and that goes into a little hole there on the other. All right, and that occurs on both sides, so it should go together like this. And then the motor retainer is a bayonet type mount, and that just goes on and twists, and that'll hold the motor in. Alright, but we're not going to glue this on, so that's going to come back off. Okay, separate those, and now carefully just apply some glue all along the edge here. Now, one of the disadvantages of the tube type cement here is it does tend to evaporate quickly. So you need to work fairly fast here. Okay, now instead of trying to paint the edge of the fin there, we'll catch that on the other side, because there will be an edge to that too. Alright, and again, working quickly here. Paint all along the edge. And if you do happen to get a little bit slopped on the outside or something like that, just leave it alone. It will dry and not be very noticeable. Right. And as I said, with the evaporation, you may need to apply this more than once. Okay, now we're going to take the two halves, put those together again. Okay, and just hold that firmly for about 30 seconds before you do anything else. While the fin assembly is drying, I'm going to skip down here to step 4, and we can put the nose cone together. Now for this part, I prefer to use the tube type cement. You can use the brush on, but it's going to take a lot of it, and you want to do it in several coats rather than one heavy one. With the tube type, just put in a moderate bead of glue all around the inside there. Okay, and then put the base piece in, give it a twist back and forth a few times to seat it well. Alright, if you've got any glue squirting out of here, just take a tissue to it quickly. Alright, and again, go ahead and hold this firmly for about 30 to 60 seconds, and then you can set it aside to completely glue. Once the glue has set on the fin assembly, then we can attach the launch lugs here. And on one side of the fin assembly there are these two raised areas, and this goes right over those. Okay, but we don't want to get glue up inside the launch lug itself. So this is going to be another case where the brush on cement is going to be better. And here I'm going to coat the entire underside of this bridge area between launch lugs. And then right around the edges again. Okay, and then carefully place this on. Alright, and once again hold that firmly in place for 30 to 60 seconds and then set it aside to dry completely. Now while we're waiting for all of the plastic pieces to dry, we can go ahead and assemble the shock cord mount inside the tube here. Now take your pencil, and on the inside of one end of this tube, I'm just going to write aft. And you may not be able to see it here, but I can see it just inside. And that's going to tell me that this is the end that's going to attach to the fin can. Alright, the shock cord mount is going to go in this end. Now, my tube got a little squashed in transit, so I'm just going to kind of unsquash it as best I can. If you get a case like this where it just won't round up, then use that end to attach to the fin can. Make this the aft. On this one it's fine. Okay, as soon as I put the nose cone in there, it's not going to have any problem. Now we need a shock cord mount, and this is found right here. Now if you don't want to cut up your instructions, make a photocopy of that and cut that. I am going to check and make sure that there's nothing on the back side of the mount that I need. Okay, so I already know what I'm going to be doing there. All right, so for this you can use scissors or your hobby knife and just cut this out along the lines. Okay, and now we're going to need a little bit of wood glue or white glue for this. Okay, so take a bead of glue and run it down the middle here over the 2 and the 3. Okay, we're going to leave the 1 unglued for the moment. And I'm going to take my finger and just smear this all over so we get a nice even covering. Okay, and you may want to be careful and put something down over your work surface if you need to. Okay, now this is a relatively short shock cord, but we're going to go with it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay this down at an angle instead of just straight down, because now we're going to fold this, so fold the 1 at the dotted line over onto the 2. And now when I fold the 2 over the 3, the shock cord that's covered here will lay against the shock cord on the side rather than directly on top of it. And that just gives it a little more clearance inside the rocket. Okay, so squish that all together, and we want to get rid of any air bubbles in there so that we just have layers of paper and glue. Okay, and now we're going to give this a bit of a curve like this. And apply a little bit more glue. And here again you want a nice even coverage with a minimum of air bubbles. Alright, now the important part here is that this is going to go down the front end of our tube. Here we go. Alright, and it needs to be at least an inch down inside from the top of it. And this is so that the nose cone does not impinge upon it when we put it together. Now the further you can get this down, the better. So if you've got long skinny fingers, this is a great job for you. Alright, so this is my aft end, this is going to go in the forward end. And so I'm just going to slide this in first, not getting the glue anywhere yet. Alright, get that down at least an inch, and I'm going to turn it over so that now I'm pressing on the inside of it against the body tube wall and against my hand here. And this is where I've got fairly fat fingers, so let's see if I can get stuck in the body tube here. Alright, but you want to get all the air bubbles out, and you want to get that shock cord mount as flat as you can inside the body tube so that we have lots of room later on for the parachute to go in there. Alright, mine looks pretty good there. And so now I'm going to let this dry. Alright, now it's time to put everything together here. So to attach the fin can to the body tube, it's going to go in our aft end here. I'm just going to dry fit this first to make sure there's no problems. Okay, it's kind of loose, but once we glue it in, it'll be fine. And here we have two dissimilar surfaces. So we've got plastic going into cardboard. The instructions show using a tube type of model cement, plastic model cement, and that works fairly well. I actually prefer to use a gel type super glue. You cannot use the runny super glue or the brush on type of plastic cement because they'll just absorb directly into the cardboard and won't make a good bond with the plastic here. Alright, so tube type plastic cement or gel type super glue. I'm going to go with the super glue on mine. And we're just going to put a bead of this right inside the edge. Just like that. Okay, and then I'm going to insert this and give it a twist back and forth a few times to seat the glue well. Okay, there's nothing to align on here unless you're trying to hide an imperfection or something like that. So that goes together just like this. Okay, and then for the nose cone, we're going to tie it onto the other end of the shock cord. So just put a double knot in that. Okay, pull that down good and tight. And then if there's more than about 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch of material here, go ahead and cut that back to 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch or so, not all the way back to the knot. We want this short enough that it doesn't get caught between the body tube and the shoulder up in here, but not so short that it can pull through the knot. And just as a little extra safety measure here, you can put just a little dot of white glue or wood glue on the knot. Don't use super glue or plastic cement for this part because it can melt the elastic cord there and cause a shock cord failure. So just put a little bit on there and just kind of work it into the knot. Alright, if you get some on the plastic, it's not a big deal. It's not going to stick very well. I'm just going to move it over a little bit so I've got room for my parachute. Alright, our final assembly then is the parachute. Go ahead and open this up and be careful not to nick the parachute. Okay, completely open the parachute and then separate all the loops here of the shroud lines so that they're not tangled up. Alright, so this has got 3 loops, and I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this part. Okay, the first way is what they show in the instructions. So go ahead and gather these 3 shroud line loops, alright, and then hang them over a finger like this. Okay, and then come down and grab the center of the parachute sheet and pull everything taut. Now all those corners of the parachute should be at about the same location next to each other there. If they're not, you can just kind of move the shroud lines back and forth until they reach that point. If they're really off, you can go back and retie a shroud line, but I don't recommend that. Okay, and so now I'm always holding onto the shroud line on one end or the other so I don't change the relative lengths. Now the way the instructions show is you take these loops, you pass them through the nose cone eyelet, alright, and then regain all 3 loops again here. Alright, pull that up, and then you're going to pass the entire parachute through there and then pull it down taut. Now I'm not going to do that because I don't like to do my parachutes this way. But that's how it shows in the instructions. And one of the main drawbacks to this is that you can lose the relative lengths of these and you may get a parachute that comes down lopsided. Alright, the other thing is, if you want to change your parachute quickly or maybe exchange it for a streamer on a windy day, you have to go through and either untie or cut the shroud lines. Alright, so I'm going to take this back off. The other way to do this is going to require that you go and buy a snap swivel. Some of them look like this, kind of a bronze color. Others are brass colored. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that the snap part here has to be big enough to go through the eyelet and still close. And when it's closed, it still needs to be able to move freely there. Alright, if you get one with the snap that's too small, it may still close, but it won't go past this point. Alright, so this one is large enough. The total weight capacity of these things far exceeds what this little rocket is, so it doesn't really matter that way. Alright, now I'm going to regain my loops here. Alright, untwist this. Go kind of back to the starting point here. I'm going to grab the middle of the parachute once more. Make sure all my corners are coming down. Alright, and now when I make my loop up here, so I get it off my finger, I'm going to make that really small initially, but I'm still holding on back in here to the shroud lines so they don't change position. And I'm going to pass these loops through the swivel end of the snap swivel, not through the snap. Okay, and this takes a little bit of patience sometimes. Alright, once you got those through, still hanging on back here so I don't change the length. Open those up once more. So now we've got shroud lines here, snap swivel, and a loop. Take the entire snap swivel, pass it through the loop, alright, and then pull it till the loops come together in a knot like that. Come back and make sure that your corners are all pretty much in the same spot. Alright, one of those looks like it moved a little bit, but it's not a big deal. If it's not the way you want it, you can simply loosen this knot and try again. Once you do have it where you want it, then like we did with the shock cord, I'm going to put just a little spot of glue on here, and that will keep that knot from unraveling and changing later on. Okay, so that now, when I'm ready to go, I can simply snap this onto the nose cone. Alright, attach the snap there, and then assemble this in the same way that I would with the parachute tied to the nose cone. Well, let's say I'm launching on a windier day and I'm afraid this might drift into a tree. I can easily detach this and then attach another one that's got a streamer attached to it. Okay, one of the other benefits to this is that parachutes tend to spin as they're coming down, simply because we rarely get the shroud lines perfectly matched, so there's always a little bit of a twist to it. Having the swivel down here allows that spin to occur without twisting up the shroud lines. If the shroud lines get too twisted, they can actually close the parachute up here, and then you get a rocket that's more falling than parachuting. Okay, then for our final assembly, and I'm going to make sure my glue's dried before I make a final assembly. Alright, go ahead and attach one of the retainers down here. Oops. Alright, that just twists on. If you're ready to launch, that will have a motor in it. And they give you an extra one in case you lose this. And I just keep this in my launch box. Alright. Have your parachute attached in one method or the other. Now I'm just going to fold this up for storage. If you're actually going to do this for a launch, put 2 squares of recovery wadding down in here before you do the rest of this. For the parachute, there are lots of different ways to pack these. My favorite is to make a triangle up here, grab my shroud lines about halfway down and pull them up as a loop, fold the sides of the triangle over, fold it down once, and then fold the sides over again, making something somewhat cylindrical there. Okay, gently put the shock cord down inside. You can just stuff this in with your finger. Now again, make sure that the shock cord mount's completely dry before you do this, or you may end up permanently gluing your parachute in. This is another job that if you have long, skinny fingers, it makes it a lot easier. Alright, and then we're going to insert the parachute down on top of everything, and that should all go in fairly smoothly. If it's hanging up or something like that, check and make sure that there aren't any projections coming off of your shock cord mount, or that maybe something's hanging up and tangling up the shock cord. Alright, and then push the nose cone on, and then you can give this a shake. Alright, now if that nose cone is coming off with that amount of shaking, you're going to need a little bit more friction there. And so the best and easiest way to do this is just add a little bit of masking tape. And you may not need it to go all the way around the shoulder initially. So I'm just going to put this on the shoulder. This is going to go around halfway the circumference. Alright, and then put that back in. Now if I do my shake test, alright, it still holds on without a problem, but it will come out relatively easily when I pull on it. And that's what we need. So once you get that where you want it, you can kind of tuck in the rest of the tape there or trim it off. And depending on weather and humidity and things like that, you may need to adjust this when you go out to launch. So you might need to take some tape off or add some more tape. Just check it every launch. Okay, and then our last bit here is to apply the decals. Now before you start applying decals, it's a good idea to wash your hands so you don't get as many fingerprints on it, and that's what I just did. And then for the main Firehawk decal, I want that to be on the opposite side of my launch lug. So I'm going to flip this over 180 degrees, and that way when it's on the launch pad, I'll be able to see the decal there. These are self-adhesive, and they tend to stick very readily. Oh, like that. It's stuck to the outline there. Alright, so I'm going to gently bring that off. Okay, so I tore that, but I think we'll manage. Okay, once this sticks to the rocket, it does not like to come off again without peeling up the finish. So we're going to try and get this as close as possible the first time. So I'm just going to gently lay that down. That's a bit crooked. Now here's where the problem can occur. As you pull this up, sometimes it takes the finish with it. Alright, so I'm going to adjust that a little bit. Still not quite straight. This one's behaving rather nicely though. It's not doing a lot of finish in it. That's too far the other way. Okay, so once you get it approximately where you think it should go, which that still is not, I'm going to go with that. Alright, so once you got it there, first press down along the middle of the decal and then go out to the sides, kind of back and forth like this, and squeeze out the air bubbles. There we go, and you can hardly notice where it ripped there. Okay. I'm not going to do all the fins here on camera. The little hawk head here is meant to go on the nose cone. Now I'll warn you, since this nose cone is not a cylinder, it's a cone, this may actually get some bubbles in it or creases because we're trying to lay a flat decal against a curved surface that is not a cylinder. Okay, so eventually we want it to line up with the body decal here, but since it's on the nose, you can move it. Try and keep this as much toward the aft end of the nose cone as you can, because that's going to have the least curve. Alright, and then again, just kind of ease this down, get the bubbles out. That actually came out fairly well. Then you can adjust the nose cone so that it lines up with the rest of the decals there. Alright, these other ones go on the fins. I'm not going to do those on camera, but you're welcome to. And also keep in mind that this is your rocket. Okay, you don't need to follow the outline that they show in the picture there. You can put the decals wherever you want. You can leave the decals off. You can even go through and paint this if you like. Now, if you are going to paint it, I would definitely use a good primer first to make sure that the paint will adhere to the body tube. Okay, but with that, this rocket is finished and ready to launch, aside from the recovery wadding. This went together really quickly. Hope you had fun building it. Have a great launch, a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.